What's up, guys? Thanks for joining me for today's video. And today what I want to talk about is how to evaluate the condition of a property when it's time to start looking at properties and consider buying an asset. Hey, you got to know what's important when you're looking at it. Sometimes, things that look really bad are pretty easily fixed. On the flip side, there are things that seem pretty minor, but have a very big cost associated with it. So I'm going to take you through here so that you can get an idea of what you need to do when you walk into a property. So the most important thing that you have to understand is that when you're walking into this rental, anything that has less than a realistic anything that has a realistic shelf life of less than 10 years, you really got to keep an eye on, and you got to budget for replacement, whether that is replacing it before a tenant moves in or budget to replace it next year, 2 years, 5 years down the line. It's very important that you have a realistic understanding of what it's going to cost and what you're going to need to do to evaluate that. All right. So let's start with number one, the mechanicals here. The mechanical aspects of the house are pretty darn expensive, even though they're expensive on their surface. In that you hire an electrician to rewire a house, it might be $8,000 or $9,000. You hire a plumber to replumb a house, you could be talking $12,000, $15,000, whatever the case might be. But when you're walking into an investment property, you got to look at all of the connected costs. For me to rewire a property, I'm going to have to bang up some walls, right? You got to expose those wires. You got to disconnect and remove the ones that are in the walls. So in order to do that, it's not just going to be the $7,000, $8,000, $9,000 to rewire the house and put in a new service line and put in a new box. We've got to replace the drywall and then paint the place and do all of this stuff. So the cost to replace electric, it might be $15,000 in a small, bread and butter type property. And it's important that you know that going in. So let's look at this. First and foremost, electrical. It's really important that you don't have any knob and tube wiring in the property. If you can see receipts or you can see an inspection from the city or local municipality showing that when the electrical was last updated, or when if the house was built in the last 20 or 30 years, it's probably okay, but you might want to have it checked out by a professional. You want to make sure that you're budgeting to upgrade any electrical that is was installed 50 years ago. Right? That's very common in Philadelphia. The last major building boom before the start in the 90s that's extended to today happened in like the 1950s. So most of the houses that we're going into, electric has to be updated. Okay. Second, we've got plumbing. Now, if you see obvious issues with the plumbing, like there's a big water spot on the ceiling, or there's some damaged drywall underneath the toilet, or things like that, hey, these are signs that there's a problem, but they're not the only signs to look for. So if you have cast iron drain lines throughout the property, the anticipated life of a cast iron pipe is about 50 years. So if it was last replaced, when it was installed in 1953, we're way past 2003. It's probably likely that thing needs to be replaced. You want to look in the basement. If you have an unfinished basement in the property, you want to look at these cast iron lines and make sure that there's no cracks or evidence of moisture sitting underneath the drain lines. From there, flush all the toilets, run the water, make sure that the shower heads work, that the faucets work, look underneath the cabinets, make sure there's no drips coming down from the cabinets. All of these things are going to play into the investment. If there's an issue, maybe it's an easy fix, maybe it's not an easy fix, but you need to know that it's something that, if you're unsure of what the cost is going to be, you can go out and get a professional to give you a bid. Next, we have heating and air conditioning. So depending on where your property is located, if you're in South Florida, it's unlikely you even have a heater in your house, right? But you definitely need central air. Whereas in Philadelphia, depending on the area of the city, but depending on when the houses were built, some of these in some of these areas, it's really uncommon to see new central air. Certainly a heater, but it's radiator heat, so there's not central air throughout the property. Whatever's typical in the neighborhood, if you have a neighborhood that is that most of the houses have central air, and you're looking at a property that doesn't, hey, that's going to have an impact on the rental rate. Okay, so you got to anticipate either installing central air in the property, or getting lower rent for that property. So again, these are things to look for. And last, under the mechanicals heading, is the connections in the street, right? Hey, the inside of the house might look awesome, but check out the connection to the street. Check out the municipality rules and regulations for what you need to have there. I mean, this is something that I've run into on a couple different occasions where we have a valve out in front of the house on the sidewalk that was snapped, and so we couldn't turn the water off. Well, guess what? The city made us replace it. You know, not a huge deal, but it's $3,000. You know, so you got to know going into it what the costs of things like that are going to be. In addition, sometimes if the house is vacant for too long, the municipality or the utility provider, they'll cut the lines off completely. Well, again, not a big deal, but who's responsible for reconnecting them? Is that your responsibility or the utility provider? If it's the utility provider, what kind of lead time do they need to connect those lines? I mean, I had an issue with a property just recently where the gas lines were cut at the street. It took 90 days to get the gas company to come out and actually turn the gas on to the property. Thankfully, we contacted them at the beginning of the project instead of halfway through, and so the timing worked out well. But it's one of those things that you have to anticipate going in. Second, we're going to look at, second region we're going to look at is the exterior of the property. I'm going to be looking at what items might allow water to come in, what might allow airflow to come into the property when it's unwanted. And so I'm looking at things like the windows. Do the windows operate properly? Open and close all your windows. If they're vinyl replacement windows and they tilt in, tilt them in and put them back. If they are not locking, if they're not working properly, mark to replace the window. Beyond that, a lot of cheap vinyl replacement windows came on the market in the early part of 2000 and the late part of the 1990s. And so what you have is replaced windows that are falling apart. Make sure that they're working properly. Make sure that they are doing their job. Make sure that there's screens in the windows. There's not a heck of a lot that's more frustrating, than trying to get some nice air in the summer or in the late spring. You open up the window, the airflow comes in, but bugs come in too. So we want to make sure that there's screens in each of these windows. Next, we got the roof. Okay, so this is a big deal. If you have a flat roof like we have in Philadelphia, the cost of replacing these roofs is not that much. We're talking about a few $1,000s to replace the roof. If you're in the suburbs or you have a freestanding single family that doesn't have a flat roof and it's a pitched roof, the cost of replacing can be significantly higher. You may be talking about $8,000 to $12,000 to $20,000 for a new roof. So these things are very, very important. When we do our renovations, we always put a new roof on because it's fairly inexpensive unless it was replaced within the last year and we have a written warranty from the roofer. This is something that you want to make sure that the roof is not leaking. It'll cause additional damage inside if it is, and this is the stuff that causes the phone call at 3 a.m. when the tenant can't sleep because there's water dripping on their head, right? So check out the roof, make sure it's replaced. Doors, look, doors have got to open and close. That's pretty straightforward. But beyond that, you want to make sure that they're sealing so that the sweep on the bottom of the door is preventing air from coming in and going out of the house. This is an important part of being a good landlord, is making sure everything works properly. If you have a tenant that is paying the rent on time in the wintertime and they got air blowing in under the front or back door, that's a big problem. They're going to complain about it. If it's not addressed, it's going to be an issue. Okay, so make sure your doors open and close properly, that they are weather stripped properly, and that they keep the weather out. All right, and concrete. So this is an area that is a lot of times overlooked. You walk up to a house and the steps are a little banged up. Oh, it's no big deal. It won't cost much to replace. You go in the back and there's a back patio on the house and there's a couple blocks that are broken up or cracked or uneven. Sidewalks, same deal. If you're buying a house on a corner lot and there's a sidewalk all the way around the property, I mean, you can be spending tens of thousands of dollars to replace that sidewalk. It's a big expense. Make sure you're taking a look at the condition of the concrete work throughout, and the walkways and driveways and things like that that are connected to the property and associated with the property. And if they need to be replaced, they need to be repaired. Make sure you're budgeting appropriately. Once we get through the exterior, now it's time to go inside. This is pretty basic stuff. when you are looking at a house. Okay, we're not looking for Taj Mahal unless you're really looking for one of those Queensguard type properties here, right? We're looking for quality installation, and we're looking for quality products that are going to continue to perform over time. What I mean by that is, number one, I hate carpet. I hate it so much. It's the kind of thing that, you put it into an apartment, the tenant moves in, everything looks great, and 3 months in, there's spots and stains everywhere. When they move out, you got to rip it out. Instead, if they've got carpet in the property, look under the carpet, see what the condition the floors are in underneath. Can you refinish those floors? Or do you put something down that's more of a hard surface that's going to last over time, like luxury vinyl plank or tile, or refinish the hardwood floors, or put new hardwood floors into the property? Yeah, it's expensive, no question about it. But it's a heck of a lot cheaper to spend $5,000 one time to put in a really nice floor throughout the property and never have to replace it again while you own it, than to put $1,500 in up front, and then when the tenant moves out, put $1,500 in again, and then when the tenant moves out, $1,500 again, and the cycle goes on and on and on. You want to use products that are going to stand up to the test of time, stand up to some heavy and some heavy use, and ultimately are going to make a lot of sense for the people that are going to be living there, and they look nice. Okay, I'm looking at walls. Look, the drywall on the walls does not have to be perfect, but if you've got areas that are crumbling or are damaged or really just don't look nice, get rid of them. Pull them out, replace the drywall. If you have a poor paint job where each bedroom's a different color, or there's graffiti or writing on the walls, for goodness sake, budget to repaint it at least. Go in there, and I'll tell you this, I've had a lot of success. When we first got started with our turnkey model, we used to paint everything the same color. Roof, walls, trim, doors, everything. Well, we changed that because we found that by adding white ceiling paint and white baseboards, we could charge about $150 extra a month because of the look of the property. That's got a big impact on your bottom line, right? So when you're going into a property, make sure the place looks nice. Choose a color that you like and is fairly neutral, grays or beiges, depending on where you're at, and then stick with that color for every property. Colors are painting a house, it's going to cost you minimally. If you do it yourself, it's going to cost you $1,000. If you hire somebody else to do it, you're probably talking about $2,000 to $5,000 to paint a property. So choose colors that are going to be, again, neutral, and things that you're going to use over and over and over again. So when the tenant moves out, instead of replacing everything and painting the entire house, you can paint a room or paint a wall or spot touch, if you get the right colors throughout the property, and it can cut down your turnover time and certainly the cost. Next, we have kitchens and bathrooms. So these are big ticket items, typically big ticket items. Bathrooms, if they are not in good shape, if they're grimy and gross, if the layout's awful, you really should budget to replace these things. On the very low end, the cheapest bathroom you're going to be looking at is probably about $3,500. We spend a little bit more than that. I would recommend doing some using colors that are just kind of moderate, either grays or tans. Put some accent tile into the tub surround and shower area, and use some stuff that's decent. The difference between doing a really cheap and cheap looking bathroom and doing something that looks a little nicer and looks almost a little semi-custom is only a few $100s. And over the course of the life of this investment, it's not much money. Always use tile floors, tile surrounds. It stands up much better than throwing in some other sheet vinyl or one of those cheap vinyl surrounds. You're going to end up replacing that more and more frequently. In your kitchens, use all hardwood cabinets. All hardwood cabinets are a little bit more expensive. We're talking about plywood backs and sides. Make sure that you're buying from a wholesale type supply house. There are a lot of these really in any region, and you can go online and look for them. Discounted cabinets, RTA type cabinets, or ready to assemble type cabinets. You're going to get them at a discount. You can get a nice quality cabinet for not a heck of a lot of money. Make sure that the size of your kitchen is commensurate with the rest of the property. If you have a 6-bedroom house, you don't want a 3 cabinet kitchen, because in a 6-bedroom house, it's likely they're going to have some kids running around, right? So likewise, if you have a studio apartment, you don't need 50 cabinets. You don't need an island and a huge kitchen. So make sure that the size of the kitchen is going to be, in pace with the rest of the property. So once you've gone through this place, you make your notes. You want to be able to evaluate what work is probably going to have to be done, definitely needs to be done, and areas where you don't have to touch, in order to create a scope of work that you can take to a contractor and get a budget for any repairs that you have to do, so that you can calculate your investment in the property. Okay, so before you go out to look at a property, you want to make sure that you're keeping an eye on the mechanicals. You're going to take a look at the exterior of the property, identify anything that needs to be upgraded or changed, and then the interior, looking at cosmetic finishes once everything is up to snuff. So that's it for today. Thanks so much for joining me. I appreciate it, and I can't wait to talk to you again. Take care.